In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
It is 100% real. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Dimension podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the unknown and delve into the fascinating world of UFO disclosure, sacred geometry, crop circles, and more. I'm your host, Matt Barone. My guest today is Michael Schratt. Michael is a private pilot, military aerospace historian that has lectured across the country on the unique subject of mystery aircraft, classified propulsion systems buried deep within the military-industrial complex. A guest speaker at the OSHKOSH AirVenture 2006-2007 event, which is the world's largest air show, Michael has developed a number of contacts which have had firsthand experience dealing with classified black programs, including former United States Air Force pilots, retired Navy personnel, and aerospace engineers that have maintained a top secret SCI, which is Sensitive Compartmented Information clearance. In an effort to expose government fraud, waste, and abuse, Michael devotes much of his free time researching aerospace technical documents, conducting interviews, and traveling to multiple university archives. As a concerned citizen, it is his belief that it is our constitutional obligation to question authority and demand an accounting of special access programs that bypass congressional oversight and public scrutiny. In this detailed and highly illustrated presentation Michael's about to show us, Michael will present the most exhaustive examination into the Leonard Stringfield UFO crash retrieval cases. Leonard's sources include pilots, engineers, medical doctors, pathologists, high-level Pentagon officials, U.S. Navy and Air Force personnel. These firsthand sources claim to have had firsthand knowledge and interaction with alleged extraterrestrial debris, bodies, and recovered craft. This is a really amazing show today. I really hope you guys enjoy it. Without further ado, here's Michael Schratt. All right, Michael, we are live now. How's everything going today?
Pretty good.
Good. I've been looking forward to this. I've seen your work for a while now, and when I saw the opportunity to get your email, I thought, man, what a treat it would be to have Michael on the show and go through some of his work with the crash retrievals of Leonard Stringfield's work.
Sure.
So I'm really looking forward to this. Off, Michael, maybe you could just tell people just maybe like a minute or two about yourself and how you got involved with all this.
Sure. My name is Michael Schratt. I'm a military aerospace historian, and the primary focus of my research deals with classified aircraft, black budgets. I'm a concerned taxpayer. I'd like to know where my tax dollars are disappearing, like we all should. We should question authority. I've had an interest in aviation my whole life. Started looking at super secret classified black aircraft programs, interviewed a number of people who worked for the defense contractor industry, and then went into the historical UFO cases at Center for UFO Studies in Chicago. That led me into the research of Leonard Stringfield. And for the last 4 years, I've made it my crusade to go through his publication with a very fine-tooth comb and pick out the mission-critical cases, commit those to very refined drawings, and then use those as a template and a guide to create full-color renderings. And that's what I want to show you this evening. Yeah, so this comes from Leonard's book, UFO Crash Retrievals, and this is page 319 of the book for anyone who wants to follow along. This was a 1942 crash retrieval at a Army base north of Georgia that Leonard didn't even know where it was. This thing was about 15 feet in diameter, about 10 feet high. It had a series of hieroglyphic type markings wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself on the bottom side. There were 3 levels. Upper level had basically a display panel, which is Rudy's drawing here, that had buttons and switches on it. So that was level number 1. Level number 2 had what looked like 4 bar stools that were positioned just in back of a wraparound window. Below that, there was another, call it a floor with an entryway hatch. So in a nutshell, those were the 3 floors of this. And now if you look on the left side of Rudy's drawing, You can see where this thing made contact with the building at the base, it ripped open, kind of a hull breach on the side of the craft. What they discovered were 4 crew members taken alive. They were about 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin. In a nutshell, that's this case. So I want to go to the blow up here. And this gives you an idea what these hieroglyphic type writings may have looked like. So if you think about what's going on here, there's got to be a group of linguistic experts, engineering experts, people who are experts in the fields of language, deciphering codes. There has to be a transnational team that's trying to decipher what all these symbols mean, because we've got at least 5 different cases now within the Stringfield collection where this strange writing is seen on the inside wall of these craft. It keeps on popping up again here. Go to the next case. 1946, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. This has to do with a small 6-year-old boy named Tex Martin. All right. In this case, this is page 242, 243 in the book. 6-year-old boy. He joined his father at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio back in 1946. He was talking to a janitor, and hopefully you can see this soda pop vending machine photo here.
I see that.
Okay. Good, we're tracking. So he was talking to a janitor. This janitor decided, hey, this boy seems like a nice kid. Why don't I offer him a soda pop here? And as he was handing this soda pop to this 6-year-old boy, I'm going to go to the next slide here. This boy looked inside this hangar, and you can see Rudy's rough drawing here. And what he saw was nothing short of incredible. He saw 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboys with unknown tarp debris. There was an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft basically propped up on tripod landing gear legs that it was off-white in color. It had 2 rims wrapped around the outer circumference. He also saw 3 ET bodies on gurneys that were laying on the floor. And he was really shocked at what he's seeing here. Now, I want to take you to the reverse view, and now you can see the layout of this scene here. This is very preliminary, rough sketch by Rudy. But if you look at the back of the hangar, you can actually see this 6-year-old boy looking through this doorway there. And I'm going to take you to the refined drawing. And this is Rudy's refined drawing that gives you an idea of what this scene looks like. So again, 20-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, tripod landing gear legs. There were 2, we can call them rims wrapped around the outer circumference. He absolutely did see 2 tractor trailers with unknown tarp debris. And then you've got the ET body. So what we ended up doing is we took everything from the 2-page report within the Stringfield book, and we used this as a guide, went to the full color rendering, and this is what we came up with here to make this case come alive. And that's the whole goal of this entire presentation here, is to take these some of these cases are 50 years old. They've been sitting in Leonard's private collection for years. Eventually all this stuff was published, but it was never committed to any type of drawing or illustration. And so that was the goal here, is to make these cases come alive based on these witnesses here.
And that's
all right. So we'll go to the next
thing, because now people have a visual context to see what these stories can actually look and feel like. So this is awesome. Keep going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Primary witness was a private in records management. And the source is Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McClellan. He's the one who wrote this book. So I want to divert one time and one time only. Here's the cover of his book here. And within the book is this original sketch by the private who worked in records management. And what he described in this case was a 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that came in from a railroad flat car from Arkansas. It was about 7 feet tall, highly polished mirror reflective exterior. There were no visible seams, no welds, no socket head cap screws, no fasteners, no hex head bolts at all. This thing was antiseptically sterile. I'm going to go to the next slide here, and this gives you an idea of what this thing looks like. Now, if you look on the upper right-hand view, what I've done is I peeled back the skin to show you the interior central column. That thing was about 3 feet in diameter, started at the bottom of the craft, went through the midpoint, and then terminated at the inside top section of the craft itself. Now, if you look to one window from center, you'll see a red dot. That was the attempted point of entry where these lab coat technicians were trying to breach this window with a diamond tip drill bit. So they had these multiple lab coat technicians that were changing shift, and they got there just at the right time when they were between shifts. And this guy showed this private and records manager because he was the MP at the base here. I'm going to go on to the next one. So this was the first pass color illustration, just to give an idea of what this thing may look like. If I go to the next slide here, this is the full color rendering by Joseph Wraith, and he's pulled back the skin now to show you that interior central column. We'll go to the next slide here. So here's Ruby's drawing, and what you can see here is they had a tarp that was partially folded off to the side of the craft. In the foreground, there was a toolbox with an electric drill and a diamond tip drill bit. So what they were trying to do is desperately get into these craft. And I've got 3 other cases within the Stringfield collection that also talk about diamond tip drill bits, acetylene torches, and lasers trying to get into these craft, and they're unsuccessful at doing it. And this has been going on for 60 years here. Let's go on to the full color rendering by Joseph Wraith. So this was put together just to give people an idea of what this may have looked like if we were there back in 1946 when this was actually seen by the primary eyewitness here. So who's the person that would have a need to know? If we take a look at this September 23rd, 1947 memo, this is from Nathan Twining to Brigadier General George Sheldon. What he says here, quote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious." So here we've got Nathan Twining talking about this. He was the base commander, so he would have a need to know. He certainly knew about what was going on here. All right, Papagos Indian Reservation west of Globe, Arizona. This is 1947. And this is a Navy combat person. He was retired at the time. He served in World War II. And basically, this is page 93, case A10 in Leonard's book. And he was with a friend. They're on a Jeep. They're on an unimproved dirt road not too far from Superstition Mountains. And they're just driving down this road. They look off to the left and they are stopped dead in their tracks. They're questioned by military personnel with rifles. They're told to vacate the area immediately. But if we go to the drawing here, you can see what they ended up seeing is that they were at the right place at the right time. Wow. When there was a retrieval operation going on right in the midst of the whole operation. They were absolutely at the right place at the right time. They look another 150 feet off to the left. There was about a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at a 40-degree angle, had a low-rise dome on top. There was a series of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference. There were 2 rims, similar to the other case that we looked at. And they're shocked at what they're seeing. They're told to get out of their area immediately. So we took the report from Leonard in the book. We hooked that up with Rudy's drawing. We used this as a basis. We came up with this full color rendering. Wow. Something like this was recovered not too far from the Superstition Mountains back in 1940. I also have this kind of side project here. I like to track where the debris and the bodies ended up. So not only are we interested in the craft, but we want to know, where did the debris ended up? Where did the hardware go? What vaults were these things taken to? Within the Stringfield collection, there is one reference, a one-page reference to something known as Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company. Conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a saucer that crashed in Arizona back in 1947. It may be the case we were just looking at. Of course, I started doing some digging here. I went into the newspaper archives. This is Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. The road to success, it says, Foote Brothers Gear. It makes gears as large as 21-foot diameter and weighing 45,000 pounds, and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. Wow. So if there was some type of hardware recovered in one of these crash retrievals, like the one in Arizona in 1947. And there was what looked like some gear teeth on it. You'd want to take it to this company to analyze it.
Sure.
Here's Hendrick's commercial, 1909. You can see this is what these guys are doing over here. This is back in 1909. So again, yes, this would be the company you would want to take it to. Purchasing agent, May 1923. These absolutely massive gears, and then things that would fit in a watch. This would be the place to go here. All right, next one, White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. So we're getting into this Roswell timeline here. Technical Sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, page 196 in the book. So that's who is the primary eyewitness here. Now, he saw the entire operation from beginning to end. This is Rudy's drawing based on the eyewitness testimony written about in Leonard's book. Now, this thing was massive. It was 150 feet in diameter. Came down at the north part of White Sands Missile Range. It was tipped up at a 20-degree angle when it came down on the sand dune. This happened at night. The whole place was excruciatingly well lit. They had light owls. They had spotlights. They had searchlights on this thing. They had motion picture film reel cameras going. They had still cameras going. They had people walking around this thing with Geiger counters, checking for radiation. Off to the right, there were tents, and there was mention of biologics recovered in this operation. So we took this as a guide, used this as a template. We came up with a full color rendering, and this is what we came up with. So some type of a massive craft came down, was retrieved at the north part of White Sands Missile Range. And what's the takeaway here? Actionable item. Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. That's exactly what needs to happen. In order for this field to move forward, not only do we need congressional hearings, but we need the physical evidence in the form of hardware. That's what we need. And we need to hook that up with the motion picture film reel cameras and the still photography. That's the only way this whole field is going to move forward. Anything less than that, and we will be here another 80 years, and we still won't know what's going on. So this is what actually needs to take place here. All right, next one. 1947, seen at a warehouse at Berkeley University. Albert Bruce Collins, now deceased, he was the primary eyewitness in the case. At the time of this going on, he was a metallurgical engineer, and this is page 197 in Leonard's book. He was at the right place when this tractor trailer backed into a warehouse at Berkeley University. I'm going to go to the next drawing here. And what he saw was an egg-shaped craft about 30 feet across. It was about 15 feet high. It had a hull breach or a crack in the egg, as he described it. Inside was a central core, which looked like an egg yolk that was about 3 feet in diameter. On the forward part of this egg was a composite panel. Wrapped around the outer circumference of this 3-foot diameter central core was another composite panel. On the lower right-hand side of the craft was a hull breach with debris and shrapnel that looked like it came from an internal implosion. And so we have his testimony on file, fantastic testimony. So we wanted to take everything we got from this metallurgical engineer, and we want to use that as a guide. We go to the next slide, and this is the full color rendering that we came up with this engineer who saw this at Berkeley University. It could still be there today.
Yeah.
They absolutely have samples there. Absolutely, they do. There's no doubt about it.
Michael, can I ask you a question? There's a lot of these. There's a lot of these crash retrievals that's been going on. It's probably not something that happens every single day, but if you give this 80, 90, 100 years, however long this has been going on, they're going to have accumulated quite a lot of these, right? And so,
correct.
I guess my question is, you're talking about this, this is Leonard's work, and you're going through with a fine-tooth comb. Have you been contacted by anybody that's been concerned that you're lighting this, or do you think enough time has gone by where most of the stuff has been moved probably 3 or 4 or 5 times, and they're not at these locations anymore? What do you think about that?
It's a very good question. So to answer that is, number one, no, I've never been contacted for one very specific reason. The way this is played is that they don't care what you know, they care what you can prove. And if you don't have a piece of physical hardware, you've got nothing. And again, what you were mentioning too is that they have diversified their portfolio. They have moved these assets from one place to the next so that you can keep tabs on this. And they've classified this higher than the atomic bomb. So senators and congressmen, they can't get access to this because number one, they don't have a high enough security clearance. And number two, they don't have a need to know. And so that's why they've been able to keep this under wraps for all these decades.
They're moving it around. Interesting. Okay. Awesome.
Yep. So we've got assets at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We've got assets at Edwards North Base Complex. We've got assets at Homestead Air Force Base. We've got things over at Tampa, at McGill Air Force Base. And so they've got all these repositories where they keep this information.
Let me ask you another question before we go into one more case study here. Obviously, we're in the middle of a bigger jump in disclosure here. When I first discovered this topic back in 2005, I thought it was all sort of BS. And then after looking into it for a couple of years, I started to change my mind a little bit, and I started to understand that there was something was going on. I just didn't know what. And then now, as time has gone on, people on the way have said, this is going to take another jump in our lifetime. And that jump seems to be happening now. We saw David Grush come out about 14, 15 months ago. You got Lou Elizondo, who has been out, but now wrote his book, and that's getting a lot of traction. Do you see this as is this the moment where we're going to spike the football and there's going to be that video evidence you're showing and that hardware? Or do you think this is going to just continue to go on with these little jumps here and there? Where do you see this going?
Right. Yeah, good question. It certainly appears that we're reaching some type of critical mass here because the giggle factor is still present in this field. It's been reduced, but it's still present. There still is a giggle factor on this subject, but you can sense that there is a critical mass growing here now. Will we ever know? Difficult to say because they're going to continue kicking the can down the road. We've already tried the democratic process over 80 years now on this subject. They're still not forthcoming. I don't see anything quickly on the horizon, but that's why I think it's so important to drill down on these crash retrieval cases because this has the hardware. This has the bodies. This has the craft. And it's only this vehicle that's going to be used to bring forth this disclosure. And so we've got to track down these remaining crash retrieval legacy witnesses and get them in front of congressional hearings so that we can get to this hardware. I don't see any other way to disclosure. It's got to come from these crash retrievals.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's probably the only way there'll be some sort of overt announcement because then you can't deny that the thing is actually there in front of you. And then you corroborate that with video evidence, which according to Lou Elizondo, they have plenty of that would convince you. Yeah, I agree. Awesome. Let's check out another crash retrieval.
Okay, good. Carrot Patch, south of Salinas, California. This is July, August, 1947. Seen by two 19-year-old workers. This thing came down the night before. It was seen by the foreman. When the two 19-year-old workers got to work the next morning, they were alerted to this by the foreman. They walked over, could not believe what they were seeing. One of them got up enough guts to basically go over and chip the side of this thing with his boot. So he made contact with this. And when I go to the next slide, here's the actual drawing sketch that came with the original report. This is not a large craft. It was about 9 feet in diameter, only 4 feet high. It had a flat top. It had a double row of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. If I go to the next slide, you can see here, X marks the spot. So this is not too far southwest of Gonzales, California. And you wouldn't find much there now. It's been so long. But back then, using this map, we could probably get within plus or minus a 16th of a mile to where it came down. Would be close enough to actually get to the site itself. Absolutely.
Wow.
Here's the first pass SolidWorks drawing that gives you an idea what this thing looks like. It's not a big craft, only 4 feet tall. And then this double row of indented windows shows up in 3 separate cases now. So there must be something going on with this window section. There's something consistent that's going through multiple cases that have this feature here. Here was the very first pass SolidWorks rendering. I'm going to take you to Rudy's drawing. So when the boys saw this craft, they walked up to it, got very close up to it. Within a matter of no more than 10 minutes, there was a convoy of military vehicles. Military personnel ordered these two boys away from the scene. There was an 18-wheeler tractor trailer that was being towed by a 6x6 troop transport. There was a few Jeeps on scene. What they ended up doing is manhandling the dish-shaped craft onto the back of the trailer. They put a tarp over it. They secured it with chains and then moved it out of the location. This was a rapid response military operation. And if we take Ruby Strong as a guide, we'll go to the next slide. This gives you our full color rendering of this particular case, which is about the best that we could possibly do based on the eyewitness testimony and the original drawing / sketch that came with the report. And again, this is all around that same time frame here. Now, I want to take you to an interesting case by Danny Sheehan. For those who don't know, he obtained degrees from Harvard University and Harvard Law School. He's a big advocate for UFO disclosure and transparency. Go on to the next slide here. In 1977, he was given a one-time only special security clearance to investigate some very interesting classified files at the Library of Congress. And if we go to this building here, it wasn't actually at this building, but it was at the building very close to the Library of Congress, which I want to get into. Now, what he ended up seeing were classified files specifically associated with Project Blue Book. These are not to be confused with the unclassified Project Blue Book records, which have long since been declassified and sent to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The photos were accessed by Danny Sheehan at the Madison Building basement during January of 1977 under the direction of the Congressional Science and Technology Committee and Marcia Smith at the Congressional Research Service. So that's how he was able to get access to these photos here. So where are the classified group Project Blue Book files now? That's really the $65 million question here. So at one time, they were brought off-site to the James Madison Memorial Building at the basement where Danny got to go ahead and access this material. So if you look at this slide, what you see here is the United States Capitol Building. Off to the right is the Library of Congress, and then just south of that is the Madison Building. So this just gives you a top view looking down, overhead view of where he actually got to see and access these files here. So he went into the basement. Once he took that elevator down and the elevator came to a halt, the doors opened up. He walked down a large corridor. He was met with two security guards that confirmed that he didn't have anything on him that he wasn't supposed to. He walked over to a microfilm reader and started looking at these files through these microfilms. And so he's scanning through these films. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And this gives you a real good idea of what he was dealing with. This period correct here. And he's thinking, I don't have enough time to look through all the documents they brought out, because they brought out this roller type of cabinet, which had what looked like cardboard boxes with a string on top with the two little buttons that had all the documents in them. But then they had other things on there. They had microfilm reels. And so he knew his time was limited. So he started loading in these microfilm reels and started going through these reels. And what he said he saw, which was unbelievable, he said that he came across 3 photographs that depict a UFO crash retrieval operation. It was a daytime scene. There was a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft tipped up at a 30-degree angle. It had a dome on top. There were 4 personnel stationed near the craft. 3 of them had still cameras taking photographs. There was a 4th guy that had a shoulder-mounted motion picture film camera. He was recording the whole scene. Now, knowing that he had limited time, what Danny did, and I've got the picture here that shows you, what he ended up doing is he took out his white legal pad. He moved it all the way back to the backing cardboard, projected the image of the crash retrieval scene onto the backing cardboard, and he proceeded to trace the outline of the symbols that wrapped around the outer circumference of the lower dome. And this is what you see here on this drawing. Those are the symbols that Danny saw on the bottom of this upper dome here. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So what did the craft actually look like? Here's the napkin drawing by Danny. You can see Rudy's refined drawing up on the top here. And so we started this whole process of going back and forth over 3 weeks to vet out all the details and make this thing absolutely as historically accurate as possible. And these were the details here. Craft measured 30 feet in diameter, tipped up at a 30-degree angle. That's what we had to have. Craft had a dome on top with what appeared to be these strange symbols wrapped around its lower surface here. It left a trail on the ground and created a mound of dirt where it came to rest. Photo depicted 4 men wearing winter parkas and furry fringes around their hoods. So he was close enough in this photo to see that all 4 men had these winter parkas on. They had their hoods up, and then they had this furry fringe wrapped around the outer portion of the upper section of these hoods. Still cameras, motion picture film cameras, and then I don't know the exact year this photograph was taken. It wasn't talked about by Danny, but looking at the motion picture film camera, I got the date narrowed down to about 1948 to 1961 timeframe. That's the best date I could come up with here. The 4 men were wearing these winter parkas. It absolutely had these furry fringes on them. Somewhat period correct vintage cameras they were using. So this thing was documented. Absolutely. The whole thing was documented. Now, he mentioned this motion picture film camera. I've got the one here with the tripod. They didn't have a tripod, but they were actually holding it on their shoulder here, documenting the entire scene. I'm going to go to the blow up here of Danny's symbols. This is seen around that dome section. We'll go to another slide, which has been a little bit cleaned up now. This is one of my artists who cleaned up the original drawing by Danny here. So I want to start taking you through the entire refining process of going from a very rough napkin sketch to a refined drawing here. So we'll go through the process here. These were some of the very preliminary sketches. You can see the people art in place here. We go to this one. He's sort of laying out the details of this mound. So when this thing came in, it left a debris trail in the soil, which still had snow on it. But then where it came to a rest, it built up a berm of snowy debris off to the right-hand side. Now we've got the tip-up angle that's about correct. We've got the 4 people in place. This is a little bit more of a refined drawing. Now, as I was showing this to Danny, he kept saying, no, you don't have the orientation correct. You've got the people correct. You've got the craft correct, but it's the wrong orientation. So what we ended up having to do is take everything you see here, rotate counterclockwise 90 degrees, and then finally got the whole thing in place here. So this was the final rendering that we came up with, rough sketch layout before we did the rotation. When we did the rotation, we came up with this drawing. And now Danny said, yes, this is very close to what I saw. Take the craft, bring it down another 10 degrees, and we'll be very close to what it actually looked like back when he saw the photograph in 1977. So we want to go to the refined drawing, and this is the final rendering that Rudy came up with. We've got the people in place. We've got the built up debris on the right-hand side. We've got the correct men in the correct configuration. We've got the cameras in place. We've got the motion picture film reel camera. We've got the upper dome with the hieroglyphic type lettering. So that was what was used as a guide to do what I came up with. The next slide here, I came up with a crash retrieval photo contest. And I put out a call to all around the world, $100 cash prize for the first person who can come up with the most historically accurate full color 3D rendering based on Rudy's refined drawing that was vetted out and confirmed by Danny Sheehan as being the most accurate. So I want to give you some of the results here. These were the criteria for winning the contest. I'm not going to go through all these here, but you had to have a 30-foot diameter craft. You had to have all 4 members in the team in the correct positions. And then this is important. There's a theoretical limit to what results you can achieve by typing prompts into an AI image generator. You still need the human touch. So You can't just type things into an AI generator and it'll spit out the correct results. The technology is just not there. You still need this human touch. So what it turns out to be is it's a hybrid. You can use AI to generate the background, that can work. And then you can use like a modeling program, Maya, 3D Studio Max, Unreal. These things can be used to generate the craft itself very specifically per the eyewitness report. And then you can finish up with Photoshop to bring in elements of the illustration, like equipment and personnel. So it turns out it needs to be a hybrid illustration. You just can't rely solely on AI. And these were the results we came up with.
Wow.
Full color render. This is Sean Lenahan. Want to give him credit. He's got all the elements in the scene. He's got the snow there. He's got the built up berm. 4 people are in the correct configuration. We've got the upper dome with the hieroglyphic type lettering. So this checks out. Give you another one here. This is another interpretation. Ben Lewis did a good job. A photo rendering here. We've got the people in place. So a good job. Then we want to go to Skylar Stallings. He did a really good job on this one. Want to give him credit. So he actually won this contest. So want to give him credit as well.
Good job, Skylar.
Yep. And then this was an illustration by Dan, first name Dan. He did a fantastic job as well. So
Very cool.
I'm thinking, we've just about got absolutely as close as we can to the actual renderings. And so that was, in a nutshell, this case that Danny Sheehan's had seen at the Madison building back in 1977 here. So next question is, where are the top secret files on UFO crash retrievals being stored? Now, this is a reference within the Stringfield collection here. They are kept in 3 large computer banks spread throughout the country. Number 1, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. No big surprise. We already knew that. Next, CIA headquarters, McLean, Virginia. They are controlling a lot of this information. CIA is definitely involved. Number 3, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. They're definitely a big player here. Now, the witness reported in the Stringfield collection said, quote, they will bend in any direction to keep them secret. And that's what we're up against. This is like the varsity team here. They will stop at nothing to keep this under wraps. Location of where ET craft are being stored. This is also a reference within the Stringfield collection. Number 1, CIA headquarters. Number 2, MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Number 3, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina, which was an interesting one. So these are just 3 locations where this information is kept under wraps. We'll continue on here. Next case, C-119 Flying Boxcar, Sierra Madre, Valley, Mexico, prior to 1951. Now, date on this one was, I believe, 1948. Primary eyewitness was in highway construction. He was an engineer. This is page 32 in Leonard's book. And I'm going to take you to the next slide. This thing was about 9 feet in diameter. How do I know that? Simple. If you measure the interior wall dimension of a C-119 Flying Boxcar, it's 9 feet, 10 inches wide. So by default, whatever was recovered cannot be any longer in diameter than 9 feet, because you have to have 5 inches of clearance on either side to fit this thing in here. So we pretty much know how big this craft was. So let's go to the drawing by Rudy here. This shows you the clamshell doors open on the C-119 Flying Boxcar and them hoisting up on a ramp this small 9-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. Now, he also mentioned that there were ET bodies were covered. They were burnt. And we'll go to the next slide. This gives you full color rendering of what this may have looked like if we were there back in 1948 timeframe. Credit goes to Joseph Wraith for this rendering. Let me zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to show you the craft and then being loaded into the back of the C-119. Now, the primary eyewitness said that when he knelt down and put his finger on the faces of these ET bodies, which were very small, he said that the skin came off on his fingers. So they were burnt, they were scorched. Here's our full color rendering. It gives you an idea of what this looked like if we were there and can actually see these ET bodies here. We'll go to the next slide. Naval Air Station, Sunnyvale, California, 1950. Hangar 1, he was a radar operator. Case B5, page 57 in the book. And I'm going to go to the next slide. So he went through these double doors. He was met and challenged by a guard, told to get out of here immediately. He's not supposed to be in here. This hangar is still here today, Sunnyvale, California. It is so large that it has its own weather. That's how big this hangar was.
It has its own weather.
Yep, it has its own weather inside. It's
Oh
that
my
big.
gosh.
It's huge. It was used to store aircraft and blimps during World War II timeframe. You could put 3 blimps in this thing, no problem whatsoever.
Wow.
So he walks into this hangar and he sees this 100-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. He's challenged by the guard, told to vacate the area immediately. And then later he told his mother, quote, "It was certainly no aircraft of ours." So let's go to the full color rendering. Something like this was seen by this radar operator. Massive hangar, huge 100-foot dish-shaped craft, had a dome on top, had a series of porthole windows wrapped around the side of the craft itself. And this is all this 1950s time frame. So why is any of this important? This 1950s time, why is this important? Because Albuquerque Journal, March 18th, 1950, it says hundreds at Farmington report large force of flying saucers. And we want to go to exactly what was seen by the witnesses here. They saw a fleet, believe it or not, of 500 dish-shaped craft flew over Farmington. This is March 17th time frame here, 1950. The leader of the group was red in color, and they could make 90-degree left-hand turns at very high speeds. They could fly backwards. This was seen by hundreds of people in Farmington, Mexico, back in 1950. Now that tracked down with a order that went out by the Air Force to our pilots. They were told to shoot these things down. This is Cincinnati Enquirer, July 29th, 1952. Shoot saucers down. Jet pilots so ordered in 24-hour alert. Let's go to the other ones here. Jets keeping 24-hour alert for saucers. On the saucer trail, pilots told to shoot them down. Jets on 24-hour alert to shoot down saucers. And this is the type of aircraft that were used in these attempted intercepts. It's the F-94 Starfire. And if you want to get a really close-up look at what these craft look like, you have to go to 2 places. Number one, at Pima Air and Space Museum. This is in Tucson, Arizona. And then the other one is the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. And you can see here that the rocket flaps are in the retracted position. But over here in Tucson, the rocket flaps are in the closed position. So if anyone wanted to see one of these intercept aircraft, these are the 2 places that you can go to see it.
Very cool.
So here's Rudy's drawing. Want to give you an idea what it looked like during one of these intercepts. And then the reason why this is important, if we go to the next slide, this is a letter from Mildred Bissell to Leonard Springfield, date October 2nd, 1979. I'm just going to go through this here. This is what this woman wrote to Leonard. It says, "I heard you speak at the MUFON Symposium in Dayton last year, and I'm interested in your research on retrievals of the third kind. I gave a talk at a local library last week, and in the discussion period following, a fellow told me that when he was a gunner in the Air Force, he had emptied his guns on a UFO and had taken pictures with his gun camera that clearly showed the shells exploding against the side of the craft. He said the camera was taken off the wing of his plane when it landed and the pictures developed. At 2 a.m., a couple of military policemen came and got him out of bed and took him to the base auditorium. They ran the 17 seconds of movie film over and questioned him and 2 other crew members until 10 a.m. He was warned never to tell about anyone what had happened. He said he had a wife and a family, a good job, and a lot to lose. He seemed afraid of the CIA and wouldn't even give me his name." So here we've got this reliable report about this Air Force personnel who emptied an entire magazine of shells on this thing. They got it all in motion picture film reel, and he was told never to talk about this. And this happened multiple times. This is World War II time frame, Korean War time frame, Vietnam. We've got gun camera footage of these UFO. None of this stuff has ever been seen. That's the kind of information we would need to release into public hearings to make this all come alive here and move this field forward. The next one, former military officer. He was in a classified materials library. He was in an unknown U.S. Air Force base. This is page 212, 213 in the book. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. He was at the right place at the right time. When he opened up one of these file cabinets, he pulled out a manila folder. And what he saw was a 8x10 glossy black and white photograph of a UFO that was retrieved. It was about 36 feet in diameter. It had a pencil-sized puncture in one of these porthole windows. There was a 3-page report that talked about ET bodies being recovered. It also talked about crashes. So more than one. By 1950, they already had more than one crash because it was plural. It was talking about crashes. I want to go through the bullet items here. Military officer had the correct security clearance, which gave him access to a classified materials library. Number 2, report seen by witness made reference to crashes. Bodies were recovered. Number 3, in addition, diamond tip drill bits and acetylene torches were used to gain access to the interior. Number 4, eventually technicians were able to gain access to the interior of the craft by way of a small entry hatch. The report said, referring to the door, that it was almost as if the material of the craft was liquefied and solidified again. I've got 2 other cases of these seams that are so fully integrated into the outer exterior skin of these craft, they're absolutely unnoticeable. You can't put a razor blade between these seams. They're so fully integrated, it looks like liquid metal. That's what's talked about here in this case. Next case, 1952. This is a Pentagon office worker, page 152, case 1 in the book. And so what happened here is this office worker, she got access to an off-limits room. By accident, she busts through these doors at the lower basement of the Pentagon. And what does she see? She sees a pickled alien in a large glass jar. She's in this room where it's dark and musty. It's poorly lit. There's some cardboard boxes off to the side. And she's seeing this large pickled alien in an ET jar here. And she's shocked. She can't believe what she's seeing. Within 10 seconds, she feels this hand on her arm. It's an MP telling her to get out of the area immediately. We did get her information in case on file. Something like this was seen at the basement vault at the Pentagon back in 1952, according to this firsthand sighting report from this military witness. Now, of course, I did some digging here. I wanted to confirm, is there a basement at the Pentagon? So this is Peninsula Times Tribune, March 25th, 1989. It says, new defense chief gets lost in the Pentagon basement. It's talking about Dick Cheney here. So Dick Cheney actually got lost in this basement, confirming there is a basement in the Pentagon here.
Can we talk for just 1 second?
Yeah, Dick Cheney used to be a former vice president under Bush II, and he allegedly went into this facility. It's been confirmed by Times Tribune here, and he got lost in this basement. Now, it's been rumored that there is multiple sections within this basement where they have debris, they have craft, they've got records, they've got documentation, they've got glossy photographs here. And this is just confirming that at the very least, there is a basement vault, there's a basement facility underneath the Pentagon. It's been confirmed now, it does exist.
I think his name is Walter Kern. Do you know him? He wrote,
I don't know.
So I think I may be getting his name wrong, but he wrote an article in one of those newspapers. It's called The Country something, that it's an actual newspaper. They don't have a website, no PDF, but he went to Colorado and he interviewed David Grush, I think about a year ago, September. And he didn't say this in the article, but he said he talked to David Grush off the record. And he asked him, he's like, who's at the top of this whole conspiracy? Who's at the top of the secrecy? And he said, Dick Cheney. That's what he said.
You know what? I wouldn't dispute that. I would not dispute that. Dick Cheney absolutely knows about this. There's no question about it. He knows about it. So I concur with that statement, 100%.
Interesting. Okay, let's keep going.
Yep, keep going. So Dutton, Montana, 1953, Cecil Tenney, civilian. He was driving down the road near Dutton, Montana. This is page 16 in the book. So if anyone wants to follow along, you can read about the details in the book. So as he's driving down the road in his pickup truck, he sees about 120-foot long cigar-shaped craft tipped up at a 45-degree angle. It's belching out smoke and flames. The oncoming traffic has their tailpipes caught on fire. He thought that was weird. So he makes a mental note. He goes another 5 miles down the road. He stops at a bar, pulls off to the right, goes in, files a report with the bar owner. As soon as he walked in, the bar owner told him, quote unquote, "You smell like lightning." That's the first thing he noticed. He files a report with the bar owner. The guy goes home thinking nothing of it. Didn't think anything of it. 5 minutes after the original witness left the bar, there was a police officer that pulled into the bar. He files almost the identical report as our witness, and then he leaves. Within about an hour of all this going down, the primary eyewitness at home gets a call from the base commander saying, "I want to see you the next morning." So he has to show up at the base the next morning. That's what you can see in Rudy's drawing here. He's grilled for hours about this, told to sign multiple non-disclosure agreements. And then as he's being escorted out of the facility by military personnel, he said that there were 2 military people walking toward him. One of these guys tripped. He fell to the ground, and he had a huge potato sack over his shoulder. This thing fell to the ground, and the primary eyewitness, Cecil Tenney, said that it looked like human body parts were inside this potato sack. Now, he couldn't confirm it. He doesn't know if it was connected to his sighting, but it could have been. To him, it looked like body parts.
Gosh.
And this took place at Great Falls Air Force Base, which is important because that was later renamed Malmstrom Air Force Base, site of multiple UFO incursions. One took place in 1967. We'll go to the next slide here. And you can see here, Great Falls Tribune, September 28th, 2010. Robert Solis talks about multiple cases of where, in specifically one case, 10 nuclear ICBM nuclear missile silos went offline. So you've got the launch control officer, who he was, and he's in the launch control complex, and at least 12 of our nation's ICBM missiles went offline. At least 10 of them, probably more like 12. Now, backstory is, a couple of weeks after this happened, Boeing engineers came in and they looked at the launch control computers from top to bottom. They could find absolutely nothing wrong with these computers. So whatever this was, whoever or whatever, it was by intelligent design and it was by intent. This was a show of force, not necessarily a proactive frontal attack here, but this was a show that, yes, we can shut your missiles down. And if we go to the next slide, this gives you an idea of what this may have looked like if we were there back in 1967 when these silos went offline here. Okay, now it's not just an isolated incident. Back in 1954 in Argentina, they had similar large cigar-shaped craft belching out fire and smoke. So it appears that this is not an isolated incident. Let's go to the full color rendering. Something like this was seen back in 54 in Argentina. Next one, Fort Polk, Louisiana. This is summer 1953. H.J. is the primary eyewitness. He was a private in the Army. Page 80, case A1 in Letters publication. In a nutshell, this primary eyewitness, he saw the entire operation. What he described seeing is a large 30-foot long egg-shaped craft. It had a fin that was wrapped around its outer portion that was still rotating. He said that he saw medical personnel assisting ETs who were walking out of the craft. They were wearing a one-piece tight-fitting green flight suit. They had a helmet on. They had oversized eyes. They had a slit for a mouth. They had a minute nose. They were wearing mittens. And he said that these beings were walking across the ground without any type of a knee joint. They only had a joint at their hips, which I thought was very unusual. They had this stair-step staggered maneuver when they were walking. Now, he also said that one of these bodies was being brought out of the craft, carried out on a stretcher. Some type of communication going on between his comrades and the being carried off into the ambulance truck. So I said, Rudy, let's do a full color rendering. We'll use this as a guide. I want to take you to Joseph Race rendering. And this shows you that where this thing came down, it was very hot. It was smoldering embers. You can see this 30-foot long egg-shaped craft. We'll blow this up a little bit here. We'll get in a little bit closer. Now you can see these ETs walking out of this craft. They were being assisted by medical personnel. And this shows you their comrade being carried off on the stretcher to the back of the ambulance truck. If I do one more blow up here, now you can see this scene in its entirety with the ETs walking out with the help of medical personnel. And so what happened to the survivors? According to the source, the survivors had been sent to a hospital and put into isolation, but all soon died. He also learned that the cadavers were sent to a medical center near Washington, D.C. So the question is, where were they sent? What medical center in Washington, D.C. has a history of ET bodies being sent there, autopsies being performed there, pathologist report, x-rays, tissue samples? It all points to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, closed back in 2011. We've got so many reports of things being sent to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Dozens of reports within the Stringfield collection. And also John Hopkins Hospital location of ET autopsies. So these two places are pivotal in this whole story here. Let's go on to the next one. This is a really good one. I like this one. This is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1953. Michael Olvey is the primary eyewitness. He was Army Reserve's warrant officer, page 15, abstract number 8, within Leonard's books, Crash Retrievals. So let's go to the scene here. Now, they had a 4-engine DC-7 cargo transport plane taxi up to the tarmac. I don't know if it took place in this hangar complex, but I believe it did. It's hangar complex number 4. And I've got the arrow here on Bay E, which is the 5th one off to the right. I've actually been inside this hangar. This is a photograph I took when I was given access to the base here. So we've got this 4-engine DC-7. It taxis up onto the tarmac. It's at night. So picture this whole scene taking place inside the hangar. There is a aft cargo bay door that opens up on the aft port side of the DC-7. And then there's a forklift that rolls over and starting to offload these crates. Now, one of these crates had 4 wooden crates on it. One of these pallets had 3 crates on it that had their tops pulled off. And this warrant officer kind of bends over, looks in, and what he saw were 3 ET bodies. They were all deceased because the lids were off. He could see they measured about 3.5 feet tall. They were wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. They had oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They were being suspended off the bottom of these wooden crates by a white netting to protect them from the dry ice freezer burn below. One of them, he said, was female because it had breasts. So we want to take this drawing, use it as a guide. We'll go to the full color rendering. And this is what Joseph Wraith came up with based on the eyewitness testimony of this warrant officer who was in the right place at the right time back in 1953 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We've got this firsthand military witness. So we want to do a top view looking down. This is 90 degrees looking down. Something like this was seen by this warrant officer back in 1953 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So who else would have a need to know about this? Dr. Eric Walker. He attended top secret research and development board meetings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1949 to 1950, where UFO crash retrievals were discussed. Here's his obituary. This is Philadelphia Inquirer, February 20th, 1995. Eric A. Walker, 84, an engineer and former Penn State president. Turns out Grant Cameron, UFO researcher, got a hold of this guy. They had some brief correspondence going back and forth. I just want to hit you with a couple of his statements here. This is from Dr. Eric Walker telling Grant Cameron, quote unquote, why say anything? You are up against the windmills. Leave it alone. It's not worth it. Forget it. I'm not going to discuss it. I don't wish to talk about it. Now, if there's nothing to UFOs and UFO crash retrievals, why is he so reluctant to talk about this? That takes us to this photograph.
Can we go back to Eric Walker real quick?
Yeah, back to Eric Walker.
There was another researcher that had a more extensive conversation with him, according to Richard Dolan's book. I forget who his name was, but he had a very long conversation with him, and there was more information that Dr. Eric Walker divulged in that conversation. Do you remember who
that is correct. That is correct. That's in the Springfield collection as well.
Okay, that's Regan.
So we want to move on to William Steinman, who wrote this book, UFO Crash at Aztec. He was a good researcher. He got a hold of Robert Saubacher, who confirmed that, yes, in point of fact, that the UFO crash retrievals were held at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Here is his letter to William Steinman. I'm not going to read all of this here, but I just want to bring your attention to this part right here. Letter from Robert Saubacher to William Steinman, 11/29/83. It says, my association with the Research and Development Board under Dr. Compton during the Eisenhower administration was rather limited, so that although I had been invited to participate in several discussions associated with the reported recoveries, I could not personally attend the meeting. So he's confirming that they did, in point of fact, have meetings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where UFO crash retrievals absolutely were discussed. What I wanted to do here is just give you a couple of cases, brief overview of some of these military firsthand sources who dealt with the bodies, the debris, and the crash retrievals. We wanted to make these cases come alive through the use of illustrations, and that's what I've tried to do here in this presentation.
Yeah, Mike, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Tell people how they can find you, what kind of things you have coming down the road. What are you up to?
Okay, no problem. I'm on Facebook. I'm on X. I have a YouTube channel, which is simply my name. So everything that we've discussed here is up on my YouTube channel, so it can certainly be reviewed. And then I also have a book that I published called Dark Files, Pictorial History of Lost, Forgotten, and Obscure UFO Encounters, and that's available on Amazon.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Take it easy, everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.